A routine traffic stop takes an unexpected turn when a black woman refuses to be intimidated by a police officer determined to assert his authority. But as the tension escalates, the cop is about to discover that the woman he's detaining isn't just any civilian. How will this encounter unfold? Let us know in the comments below. The red and blue lights flashed against the dark pavement, painting streaks of color across the quiet street. Officer Greg Simmons tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the black luxury sedan idling at the stop sign a few yards ahead. It wasn't speeding, it wasn't swerving, it wasn't doing anything wrong, really. But something about it just didn't sit right with him. Simmons let the moment stretch, his fingers tapping against the dashboard, his knee bouncing. It was a feeling he'd come to trust over the years. The same feeling that had led to countless good stops, as he liked to call them. And tonight was no different. Flicking on his siren, he pulled behind the sedan and watched as it glided smoothly to a stop. The driver didn't hesitate. No sudden movements, no panic. Almost too calm. Simmons smirked to himself as he stepped out of the patrol car, adjusting his belt, his chest puffed out just a little more than usual. He liked this part, the approach, the power in his stride, the way people shrank under his gaze. But when he reached the driver's side window, the woman inside didn't shrink. She didn't fumble for an excuse or start explaining herself before he even spoke. No nervous hand-wringing, no shifting eyes. She just turned to face him, her expression unreadable, her fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel as if she had all the time in the world. "License and registration," Simmons said, keeping his voice firm. No need for pleasantries. The woman tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes studying him. Then, without a word, she reached over to the glove compartment and retrieved the documents. She moved slowly, deliberately. Not like someone who was afraid, but like someone who wanted to be sure there were no misunderstandings. Simmons snatched the papers from her hand, barely glancing at them before shifting his stance. "You know why I pulled you over?" The woman arched an eyebrow. "No, but I'd love to hear it." That wasn't the answer he expected. Most people, guilty or not, tried to guess. They stammered, they apologized for something. But she was different. There was something in the way she sat, the way she spoke, like she wasn't concerned, like she wasn't impressed. Simmons forced a smirk. "Your taillight looks a little dim. Might want to get that checked." A slow blink. Then she leaned back against the headrest, exhaling through her nose. "You and I both know that's not why you pulled me over, officer." His smirk faltered. "Excuse me? You had your lights on me before I even touched the stop sign," she continued, her voice smooth, controlled. "You didn't see a violation. You saw a black woman driving a nice car and decided to investigate." Simmons felt something twist in his chest, but he quickly buried it under a layer of authority. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. Standard protocol." Standard for who? The question lingered between them, heavy, challenging. He shifted his weight, gripping her documents a little tighter than necessary. "Where are you headed tonight?" She smiled. Not a warm, friendly smile, but one edged with something he couldn't quite name. "Do I need to tell you that? You do if you want to cooperate." She let out a soft chuckle. "I see. So cooperation means answering unnecessary questions." Simmons bristled. He didn't like this. The control, the rhythm of the stop. It wasn't going the way he wanted. "Step out of the vehicle." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not nervousness, but a quiet consideration. Then she nodded, unbuckled her seatbelt, and pushed open the door. She was taller than he expected. Not towering, but she carried herself with an ease, a presence that made it clear she was used to being in control of situations, not the other way around. She adjusted the cuff of her blazer as she stepped onto the pavement, her heels clicking softly against the asphalt. Simmons squared his shoulders. "Turn around, hands on the hood." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Am I being detained?" "Routine check." Is that what I asked? Simmons felt heat rise up his neck. This was supposed to be simple. Ask a few questions, let her go if she was clean, maybe find something, maybe not. Either way, it was about control. But now, she was flipping it on him, making him feel like the one under a microscope. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen, ma'am. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You're making a mistake. Her voice was calm, but something about the way she said it made him pause. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't trying to talk her way out of anything. It was a warning. Simmons exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Ma'am, you... Detective. The words sliced through the night air. Simmons blinked. What? Her eyes never left his. Detective Harper Lawson? Internal Affairs? For a moment everything stilled. His breath caught in his throat. He felt his pulse spike, confusion battling against a sudden, creeping realization. Internal Affairs. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked down at the document still clutched in his hand, the ones he hadn't really read. Now, they burned in his grip like a live wire. She tilted her head, waiting, watching. And in that moment, Greg Simmons understood something with a cold, sinking certainty. He had just pulled over the one person in the entire department who had the power to end his career. Officer Greg Simmons felt the blood drain from his face. He glanced down at the license in his hand, the name now standing out in bold letters like a flashing warning sign. Harper Lawson. Internal Affairs. The very department that officers like him whispered about in locker rooms. The division that had the power to dig into every past complaint, every questionable stop, every abuse of authority. And he had just detained one of their own. For the first time that night, Harper Lawson's calm expression shifted. Her lips curled ever so slightly, not in amusement, but in something far more dangerous. Recognition. You look a little pale, Officer Simmons. Something wrong? She asked, her voice smooth as glass. Simmons' mind raced. He had options. He could double down, pretend he hadn't seen the name. He could let her go, act like this never happened. But neither of those choices would undo the damage already done. You should have mentioned who you were earlier, he said, trying to regain control, but his voice lacked the same confidence it had just minutes ago. Harper crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. Should I have, or should you have conducted the stop properly, without racial profiling, without intimidation, without assuming that I didn't belong in my own car? Simmons swallowed hard. You don't want Officer Simmons? You don't target black drivers in expensive cars? You don't fabricate reasons to pull them over? Ever. His jaw clenched. I was doing my job. Her eyes darkened. Then let's talk about your job. About how many stops like this you've made. About how many complaints have been filed against you. About how many of them have been quietly ignored. His stomach twisted. Harper stepped closer, her presence pressing into him. This isn't just about tonight, Simmons. This is about a pattern, your pattern. You think I don't know your name? Simmons's mouth went dry. I do, she continued, and so does Internal Affairs. Simmons had heard rumors, whispers, that IA had been ramping up investigations, that certain officers were being looked at more closely. But he never thought he'd be on their radar. His grip tightened on her documents, his fingers trembling. So what now? He asked, voice hoarse. That depends, Harper said, folding her arms. Are you going to keep trying to flex your authority, or are you going to start listening? Simmons' head swam. He needed to get ahead of this. Look, he said, lowering his voice. Maybe we both walked into this situation wrong. How about I let you go? No harm, no foul. Harper let out a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. Oh, Simmons, you still think you have control here, don't you? He felt heat rush to his face. You already made your mistake, she continued. This stop, this moment, it's not going away just because you want it to. So tell me, officer, how deep are you willing to dig this hole? Simmons's fingers twitched at his side. I don't want any trouble. Trouble? You already started it, Harper shot back. And I'm just making sure it gets documented. At that moment, she pulled out her phone. Simmons' breath hitched. Wait. She held it up, showing the bright red recording indicator. This stop has been recorded since the moment you walked up to my window, she said coolly. Every word, every action. His stomach dropped. She let the weight of that reality settle over them before continuing. So tell me, Officer Simmons, are you ready to tell the truth? He stood frozen, his mind scrambling for a way out, a way to undo what had already unraveled beyond his control. Harper sighed, shaking her head. You don't get it yet, do you? This isn't just about me, this is about accountability. You could have stopped this before it even started, but you didn't, and now we're here. Simmons' jaw locked, his fingers flexing as his thoughts spiraled. He could already see the fallout, his name in reports, the department reviewing his stops, the press, if this ever leaked out. Harper stepped back, glancing down at her watch. It's getting late, and I have work to do. Simmons' breath stuttered. So, what now? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. That's up to you. For the first time in his career, Greg Simmons realized that he wasn't the one holding the power. He wasn't in control of this stop, of this narrative, of his own future. Harper Lawson was. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do to change that. Officer Greg Simmons had never felt this level of helplessness before. The power he was so used to wielding was gone, gripped from his grasp by the woman standing in front of him, calm, composed, and completely in control. Harper Lawson wasn't just another driver he could intimidate. She was internal affairs. She was the nightmare of every cop who thought they were untouchable. And now, she held his career in the palm of her hand. The night air felt colder as Simmons stood stiffly, his mind racing. He wanted to rewind, undo the moment he flicked on his sirens, the moment he assumed she was just another black motorist ripe for questioning. But there was no undoing it. There was only what came next. You have a decision to make, officer, Harper said, slipping her phone back into her pocket. Simmons swallowed, his pulse hammering in his ears. And what decision is that? Her expression remained unreadable. You can walk away from this and pretend it never happened, just like all the other stops you've made. You can keep telling yourself it was just procedure, just another part of the job. She took a step closer, her voice lowering. Or you can face what this means. The truth. About yourself. Simmons' jaw tightened. And if I don't, Harper's lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in it. Then internal affairs will make sure that you do. The words were like a gunshot to his chest. His entire career flashed before him. Every questionable stop, every report that got brushed under the rug. He thought he had been careful, but now, standing in front of her, he knew the truth. He wasn't careful enough. Are you saying you're filing a complaint against me? He asked, forcing his voice to stay steady. I don't have to, Harper replied smoothly. The evidence is already there. Your history is already under review. My report? That's just the final nail in the coffin. Simmons' stomach twisted. So that's it? You're just going to destroy my career? She tilted her head. Destroy? No. But accountability? That's overdue. His fingers twitched at his sides. He wanted to argue, to fight back, to say that this wasn't fair. But deep down he knew that wasn't true. The truth was he had built his career on stops like this, on knowing that no one would challenge him. Until tonight. Harper watched him carefully, reading him in a way that made his skin crawl. You have a chance here, Simmons. A rare one. His brow furrowed. A chance to do what? She sighed, shaking her head. To actually make a change. To be better than the officer you were when you pulled me over. Simmons let out a bitter laugh. And what? Just admit I've been profiling? Throw myself at the mercy of IA? Do you think this is about me? She asked, raising an eyebrow. This is about the people you've stopped before, the ones who didn't have a badge to protect them, the ones who didn't have a recording, the ones who weren't lucky enough to walk away. Simmons looked away, his stomach churning. He didn't need her to remind him. He knew. He had always known. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Harper reached into her blazer and pulled out a card, holding it out to him. Simmons frowned. What's this? My direct line, she said simply. Use it when you're ready to talk. Really talk. He stared at the card, hesitation flickering across his face. And if I don't? She shrugged. Then we'll see you at the next internal affairs hearing. The weight of those words pressed down on him. There was no escaping this. Not entirely. No matter what he did, his name was in the system now. His actions were under scrutiny. For the first time in his life, Officer Greg Simmons wasn't the one in control of someone else's fate. Someone else was in control of his. He took the card from her fingers, his grip tight. Think about it, Harper said, stepping back toward her car. You can keep pretending this was just another night on the job, or you can decide to be something more than just another cop with a badge and a bias. She opened the car door, pausing before getting in. Change starts with accountability, Simmons. The question is, are you ready for it? And with that, she slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away, leaving Officer Greg Simmons standing alone in the flashing red and blue lights of his own making.